Sadly, sometimes our fuel taps leak. And that's pretty sad, because when your fuel tap leaks, it's a real problem. Generally they leak from around this area here, from the tap itself. There's actually a little rubber, sort of a pad behind that forms the seal, and that can wear out over a period of time, and you'll just come in one day and find a puddle of fuel under your bike. Now you can't ride like that. It's just not possible. If it's leaking bad, if it's just a drip, yeah, maybe you could try and get away with it, but it's definitely not safe. But replacing your fuel tap is actually pretty easy. Now the way I like to do it, you do need to remove your seat and your side covers, but leave your tank on, first step. Now, there's probably still fuel in your fuel tank, and that needs to be dealt with, because if you take your fuel tap out, you're going to have petrol running down your arms, all over the ground. It's going to get messy and flammable, which is a really bad combination, in my opinion. So let's start by draining the fuel. You need a can. Now, you can have a bit of fuel on and disconnect from the fuel tap itself, and then just plug this bit of fuel line in there and run it straight into the top of your container, and just turn your fuel tap on and walk away, have a cup of coffee or whatever, and come back in 10 minutes or so and it's probably quite drained. I mean, if your tank was full, it's going to take longer than if your tank was empty, and it's not going to take very long at all if your tank has emptied itself all over the floor. Now, an alternative to that is to pull the fuel line from the carburetor's end and put that into your container. Turn your fuel tap on. Ooh, let it drain away. Now obviously there isn't a great deal of fuel line to spare. You might need to sort of use a taller can or put bricks under it, whatever it takes. So we'll let that drain off, and we'll come back and we'll actually do the change of fuel tap. It would be wise of me to sort of mention that the best time to drain your fuel tank is on level ground, when it's on the side stand. You'll find that you'll drain slightly more fuel out of it that way. So we ran that for about 5 or 10 minutes, and that's it. Nothing else is coming out of the fuel line now. So we'll call that that. Ooh. And what we're going to do now is just take the tank off. Oh. Someone forgot his fuel tank sender for the gauge. That's basically that. Now, a good way to protect your tank's paint is to use the seat of the bike as a convenient little resting spot for it. So let's go up to the fuel tank now. Fuel tap. 22mm spanner. And the big nut there. Some fuel loss is just about mandatory. Now this gets a little deceptive because here there's actually a plastic tube, but it stayed in the tank. But we'll fix that. We don't want to damage anything. Here we go. That was too easy, wasn't it? And that tube is sort of like a pre-filter, like a strainer. So definitely want to make sure we've got one of those. Oh, now it's always a good idea to compare your original part to the replacement part before you put it on. And they look good. But I don't actually have a leaking tap. I was just checking out these guys. So I'm actually going to put my old fuel tap back on. But let's pretend that it's a new one. So it really is just a case of putting it back on the same way it came off, and it is really easy. We'll just get that in there finger tight. Just check to make sure that it's roughly parallel where it should be. Get our 22mm spanner. Now this has a rubber O-ring in it, so you definitely don't want it over tight. Just want to nip it up so that it doesn't leak. Nice. And we'll put that back on the bike. Okay, so you remember how this goes. Those two little slots and those two little rubber pins there. If you don't remember how that goes, there is a video on how to remove your seat, tank and side covers. Go. I'm just going to leave that on loosely until we put our fuel tap, our fuel line back on. Now, it's kind of useless me showing you guys how to put the fuel line onto this carburetor, because this is not a standard carburetor. So, as a general rule, wherever you took it off from is where it goes back. So that's my carburetor end, nice and firmly. Now, just to avoid confusion, this is your standard carburetor, and it sits like so, and that is your fuel line there. So you would just simply slip that fuel line back on there. So we'll pretend we did that. And then we'll put that back onto the fuel tap, and you're good to go. Obviously you need to put fuel in your tank. You will need to reattach your seat, tank and side covers. Go. And then you've replaced your fuel tank tap. Happy motoring.